Now we're going to hear from some of the leaders of our life sciences community, those who've been working with their teams to do some pretty remarkable things in light of this pandemic. First, we're going to hear from Roche Diagnostics President and CEO, Matt Sause. Then we'll hear from Dave Ricks, Chairman and CEO, Eli Lilly and Company.
So Roche has had quite a few contributions to the pandemic, from the therapeutic side as well as our diagnostics business here in Indianapolis and globally. The one that I think we're perhaps best known for is our approval for our SARS-CoV PCR assay, which was approved very close to the date that the national emergency was declared on the 13th of March. So we were able to deliver testing very quickly in that we started work using the sequence of the virus as soon as it was published. And what we did was we began our manufacturing in parallel with the development work that was going on in our laboratories. And we also worked in advance with government agencies on identifying the laboratories that would have the widest geographic reach to ensure the broadest access to patients as soon as we were able to provide them with testing kits. I think that the pandemic has fundamentally changed the diagnostics industry in the United States, and that it's cast a light that our diagnostic testing infrastructure is insufficient to handle a pandemic, and that the country needs to be prepared for future pandemics and ensure that we have the trained personnel as well as the testing infrastructure to be able to carry that out. And I think that's an advantage for our society, advantage for patients, and certainly for our industry. I've really been inspired by how our team has stepped up in this time of crisis. So a couple things, and just looking at it throughout our supply chain. So what you saw in our operating group in Branchburg, New Jersey, where we manufacture these test kits, people really working around the clock to build and develop the kits. Then to our global logistics hub here in Indianapolis, where teams worked around the clock to deliver those tests out as soon as we got the FDA approval to patients. And I also really want to call out our service engineers that had to go in and do the software upgrades and install new instruments. They were going into some of the virus hotspots early on in the pandemic when the virus was not well understood, and making sure that those hospitals were set up to be able to test. And I know that was a very stressful and challenging environment for them, but their selflessness and their courage and commitment to helping patients was really inspirational to me. And also our commercial education team, which continued to train customers so that they were able to deliver the test, and our entire support organization that made sure customers who were obviously running tests faster than we could manufacture them, that they didn't run out, and made sure that we were able to handle all the logistical challenges. I've never seen the organization step up like they have.
As we approach conquering COVID-19, there's really three medical strategies. One is vaccination. Lilly's not involved in that, but many companies are, and I'm increasingly optimistic we'll get those at some point here, probably into 21. But there's two others, and we've been deeply involved with these. One is taking medicines we already have indicated for other use and testing their application to either neutralize the virus, known antivirals, or support patients who get sick in the hospital. We have a medicine there called Olumiant or baricitinib, and then also building new medicines which can attack the virus directly, and we've been doing that as well. On the first one, baricitinib, we entered into a study back in May. This was really triggered by some work by a biotech group called Benevolent AI, which has looked at theoretically what medicines might be helpful, and they identified baricitinib early in that process. Once we had one successful medicine, remdesivir, we began working with that company, Gilead, and the NIH to stand up a phase 3 study of baricitinib plus remdesivir in patients with COVID who are hospitalized. And just recently it read out, it was positive, showed that if you use that combination, patients leave the hospital a little little earlier, and that's great news. Additionally, about the same time, early March, we put a team together to create monoclonal antibodies which would neutralize the virus. We collaborated with a different company, Abcelera, which had identified through the blood of one of the early survivors, the plasma of an early survivor, several antibodies, and we isolated them and optimized them. And what's now known as Lilly SARS-CoV-555 is literally the 555th one we identified, and just finished the first ever proof of efficacy studies in man, and that was positive as well. Yeah, so the story of diagnostic testing is quite interesting. Of course, early on in the pandemic, we could see from what was happening in just, they seemed like weeks, but it was actually day by day with the shortages in testing. And when I learned of the challenges we were having here locally in Indiana, I had a conversation in the hall with our head of R&D. I said, can we do that? He said, yeah, we've been thinking about this. So he put a team on it. We have what's called a CLIA-approved lab, a certified lab, which we use to support clinical trials and do our own testing for that. So we repurposed that whole laboratory to do PCR testing for COVID-19. And we developed our own test. We did that because many of the ingredients you needed for the commercial tests were not available. So we made our own ingredients. We used our chemists to make our own supplies. We registered that with the FDA, and within 3 weeks of that conversation, we were up and running with our own COVID testing. And I have to say, at that time, we were running like a few dozen tests a day in the state. Lilly's effort ramped that up to over 2,000 a day. Others came on, and great partnership with Chris Box from the State Department of Health, as well as Governor Holcomb's office, to really embrace all comers to help. At the end of that process, we then transferred that technology back across the state to state hospital systems to stand up their own testing efforts. And I think right now, Indiana's in great shape on testing. We don't have a shortage, and the turnaround time's pretty good. Well, the role of the biopharmaceutical industry in everyday life is significant. Maybe if we just listen to Washington politicians or read headlines, you'd think that our main role is charging people money for what we do. But actually, our role is sustaining life. And more than 100 million Americans take a medicine the innovative pharmaceutical industry makes every day to have a better life. And those medicines don't grow on trees. They certainly don't come from China or India. The new and invented medicines we make come from laboratories like the one downtown Indianapolis we have here and our other labs around the country, along with our peer innovative companies. It's a reminder that that process, which is expensive to do, and yes, medicines are expensive, has built up a huge capability in this country, unlike anyone else's. And when we've turned that against a problem like COVID-19, the story's not over yet, but I think it will turn out that mostly American technology, American companies are the ones who made the products that will have defeated this virus. A vivid reminder of the difference this industry can make. So perhaps we have a chance to reset that conversation, to remind people, again, what heart medicines, diabetes medicines, cancer medicines, where they come from, and the role that companies like Lilly and other biotechnology companies in our state can play to conquer the worst of human disease. Lilly's in great shape as we enter a new decade. We have ahead of us very little patent expiry and a number of drug launches. We have probably one of the better growth pictures in the industry and in areas that really matter to people. I mentioned diabetes and cancer, autoimmune diseases like lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, which affect millions. We have medicines for those who are working on them. We also are continuing to work in neuroscience, both chronic pain using non-opioid medicines and in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. We certainly haven't given up that fight as well. The next 5 years is going to be so exciting for this company and hopefully restorative for the patients who are looking to us for new solutions.
As you can see, both of these Indiana companies jumped into action to help in unexpected but incredibly valuable ways. And they weren't alone. Rajeev Ronanki, who is Anthem's Chief Digital Officer, is going to talk about the dashboard they created in response to COVID-19. And following that, Dr. Kristina, Indiana's State Health Commissioner, will share her thoughts on how the state has reacted to this pandemic.
Hi, I'm Rajeev Ronanki. I'm Anthem's Chief Digital Officer. And today I want to talk to you about Anthem's response to COVID-19 and the solutions that we've developed as a result of that, as well as give you some insights on how the pandemic has shaped our future thinking and how it's reshaping our company, as well as to a certain extent reshaping the future of our healthcare industry. So first on COVID-19 solutions, as the pandemic started to unfold in the early part of the year, one of the issues that we faced was the lack of data and accurate information to base our decisions on. So we rapidly assembled a team and reconfigured a platform to integrate all the data sources that were needed and start to develop algorithms to give us a one-stop shop, so to speak, for predicting trends and understanding the impacts, and really looking at all dimensions of the impact of COVID-19 to the health of our members, the impact to our employers, the impact to social and public health issues, economic issues, job loss issues, and put it all together and really understand a range of scenarios that we need to model for and respond as a business. And as we started using it, we realized that this particular tool, C19 Explorer, could also serve as a public utility. So we made it available to public health officials at the state, local, and federal level. If you started to use it for the same reasons. And you can check it out at c19explorer.io. and let us know what you think. Another solution that we developed was an app called Sydney Care. And Sydney Care is available to all consumers across the US, not just Anthem members. What Sydney Care does is it enables users to triage symptoms. And the symptoms could be COVID-related or generally any other health-related issue. And our artificial intelligence machine learning algorithms triage the symptoms and then guide the users to the next best action. And the next best action could be to engage in a text visit with a doctor, have a chat conversation that could be spread out over 2 weeks, or have a video, consult, and based on the input from the physician, take the appropriate action to the symptoms that was reported by the user. Now, as you can imagine, at the time when in-person care was sparse or unavailable in most areas, this app served a valuable role, and over 200,000 consumers across the country took advantage of it, and we got lots of good feedback on how it's proved to be a viable alternative to in-person care. Now, looking ahead to the future, as there were many lessons that were learned from the pandemic. In many ways, it's served to accelerate our digital journey and accelerate our digital transformation of Anthem's core business processes, our interaction systems with our consumers and our different stakeholders, and it allowed us to leverage our platform. At Anthem, we're building a digital health platform that connects our members and our stakeholders to the care delivery infrastructure and resources. And as a platform has the ability to learn from every interaction between member and the care delivery infrastructure and resource. With every interaction, the platform gets better and smarter, and in so doing, it could deliver more personalized insights that could be used to continually calibrate how care gets delivered. So in the future, you could imagine a model where care that's either physical or virtual through text, telemedicine, email, and other means, or digital that's delivered via AI and chat and other modalities, could all be connected and care for our members holistically without missing a beat. So a system that's much more predictive, proactive, and personalized could radically simplify the healthcare system in the country. And while as bad as this pandemic has been for our country, I think the one silver lining could be that it radically reshapes the future of our industry and simplify the healthcare system for all of us. Thank you.
When we started 2020, it felt like a normal year, full of promise and the unexpected. We were focused on reducing infant mortality and preventing kids from vaping as part of our public health agenda. Little did we know that this really would be the year of the unexpected, and that our entire health infrastructure would be forced to pivot to address a threat that none of us had experienced before. COVID-19 has challenged us all in ways we never could have imagined. We have been forced to face our limitations, build on existing strengths, and create new ones. I, for one, believe that our healthcare system, whether it's public health or our hospitals or our life science companies, will forever be changed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We started preparing for COVID-19 long before it arrived in Indiana in early March. One case became dozens, and the deaths began to multiply, and we worked to build our knowledge and bring in more resources to position the state for the strongest response and mitigation possible. We didn't know much about the virus at that point. Limited testing was available, and we weren't sure what was reliable and what wasn't. Some areas were concerned about PPE supplies. Guidance from the CDC kept changing as more was learned. As we recognized those challenges at the State Department of Health, we quickly realized that we were at war, and that we would be best positioned if we engaged partners around the state to roll up their sleeves alongside us. We are so blessed to have so many of our healthcare and life science partners come alongside us to get us to where we are today. Eli Lilly stepped up not only to produce test kits when none were available nationally, but also running thousands of tests for us so that we could ensure that the sickest and highest risk Hoosiers could get tested quickly. Early testing required a tedious extraction of DNA, and Lilly did that for us and helped our lab and others diversify the testing. Cook Medical Group helped with viral transport media, which was critical early on. Since then, we've had 14 labs join forces to help us create the lab testing network. This gives us more buying power for those critical reagents and swabs, and also ensures that Hoosiers can get their tests processed here at home. That means we don't have to wait a week for more to get results from an out-of-state lab that's inundated with specimens from around the country. We've seen partners like Covance and Roche help find ways to ensure we not only had testing supplies and capacity, but also could diversify our testing methods with point-of-care options. Our academic and research partners have been invaluable too. When we started this journey, we were focused on responding and trying to stop the spread of disease. These partners took a deep dive into the literature and research and examined and analyzed the data. CTSI and IU and Regenstrieve and IHI all stepped up. Today, we have an incredibly robust data dashboard that someone on Twitter recently hailed as the best in the nation. I'm not on social media, but I'm told that being called out on Twitter in a positive way is a good thing. We will take that win. Thank you to the Indiana Hospital Association and our hospital systems, which got creative and found ways to repurpose rooms to create more ICU beds and helped build support for reporting ICU beds, ventilator capacity, and PPE needs to our EM resource system. Preparing us for a possible surge was an all-hands-on-deck effort that taught us all valuable lessons about how we can achieve what seems to be the impossible. Through our collective efforts, the surge did not materialize. Today, I'm proud to say that our ICU bed capacity has held steady, and our less than 3% of our ventilators are in use for COVID patients. When I think of all that we've accomplished as a state these last 8 months, I'm filled with feelings of pride and disbelief. Many times we have told ourselves that what's being asked of us is impossible, and yet we made it happen time and time again because of our team at the health department and because of our partners. People keep asking me, when will things get back to normal? You know as well as I do that our work is far from over. More than 100,000 Hoosiers have contracted COVID-19, and more than 3,200 have died of this disease. We continue to see new cases every day. Our schools and our communities are struggling to find the new normal. And while companies are working feverishly on a vaccine, we know that early options will be limited and that it will be many months before a vaccine is available for the broader population. That means we can't relax our guard. So, remind people to wear their mask. Stay home if you're sick, and answer the call if a contact tracer reaches out, because you might just protect the people who are your world. Thank you for all your efforts during this unprecedented time. This year is one for the record books, and I'm confident that when historians look back on the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, they will see incredible partnerships that saved Hoosiers' lives.
Dr. Box, thank you. Finally, Pete Yonkman, president of Cook Group, is going to talk about how that company has been impacted and what they're doing in their community to help out.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Yonkman. I'm president of Cook Group and Cook Medical. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I wish I could be there in person, but I guess that's the topic of today's conversation is how has the pandemic affected our work? And I guess I would summarize that by saying that the pandemic has affected just about every aspect of how we do our business. It's changed how our customers expect us to interact with them. It's changed how they deliver their health care. It's changed how us as employees, how we do our work. In our manufacturing facilities, we've had to redesign them to enable social distancing. We've asked many more people to be remote than we have previously. And so I'm sure there's a lot of topics we could discuss about how the pandemic has impacted our business. But I wanted to focus on something maybe a little bit different, or just one aspect of how it's changed our thinking about how we exist as a corporation. Maybe the best way to think about this is represented by this slide. As the pandemic began and over the last several months, I think we've had to lean on each other more than ever, both as organization and as individuals. We realized that as an organization, we couldn't do our jobs and we couldn't continue to provide medical devices without the help of our school systems, our community members, our community infrastructure, the non-for-profits, and all of our business partners had to step up and learn how to do business differently. And I think that reinforced for us that we don't stand alone as an organization. Particularly, we don't stand alone in our communities. And that's the issue I want to focus on today. What is the role of a corporation? What's the role of a company? And what's the role of a community to help support companies during times of crisis, but also as we go forward and we think about trying to tackle some of the issues that we all face as a community, as a society. Sometimes as organizations, we view our primary objective as delivering value to our shareholders. And often that's a financial value. But I think we've seen during this time that organizations have the ability to go way beyond just a financial return. They have the ability to support our communities and support our schools and our restaurants. And in turn, those same institutions have the ability to support us as companies and all of us as employees that work for those companies. I think that's become clear to all of us during the pandemic, and I hope it's something that will stick with us beyond the next 6 months or years to come. So what can we as companies do? If we recognize that we have this reciprocal relationship with our communities, what can we do as organizations to make sure that we are fulfilling those obligations and getting the benefit in return? One way to think about our organizations that maybe goes beyond just a financial return is to start to think about all of those people that we talked about that are connected to us as an organization. And we do this all the time in business. We ask ourselves, what is the level of connection we have with various stakeholders? How deeply connected are we to our customers or to our supply chain? But if we start to take that same idea and think about how connected are we to our school systems? How connected are we to the restaurants that service our families and employees? How connected are we to the not-for-profits that help people who are struggling in our communities? We can start to see whether or not we have those relationships in place that we'll need, not just during a time of a pandemic, but also as we continue to do our business going forward and as we think about how we support each other in the community. I feel fortunate to work for an organization that has, in its DNA, has always been deeply concerned about its communities and also been willing to be an active participant in making those communities better. And I think what we've seen over time is that those, of course, have benefits for all of us who live in the area, but they also have benefits for us as a business, too. So in times when we've reached out, other organizations have been struggling, they've appreciated that help. But then maybe years later, they come back and maybe we're struggling with an issue and they help us. And it's that give and take that makes a community successful, but it's also that same give and take that makes us successful as an organization. And I think the opposite's also true. If we as an organization aren't connected to our communities, if we aren't active participants, then there's a risk. And the risk is that when we have a struggle or we have something that we need from the community, they won't be there to support us because they haven't seen us in the past being there to support them. So I think it helps build community relationships. It obviously helps us in the community and our communities be more successful. But it also helps us from a business standpoint to be sure that if we are struggling, if we do have a need, or if we need some help, that people will be there to support us when we ask. As I said, we're fortunate to work for an organization and a company that believes deeply in being connected to its communities. And so I want to give you just a few examples of the work that we've been doing over the last few years to make sure that we are connected and that we are using our opportunities, our skills, and our resources to help benefit all sectors of the community. I want to start with this example because it goes back 35 years in our history. This is a program that was started by Bill Cook, our founder. And Bill met a person who had a son with mental and physical disabilities, and that person was asking for some help finding work for their son. And Bill said, well, let's just put him to work. Let's see how that goes. Well, their son was living in a place called Stonebelt. Stonebelt's an organization that provides daily living services for people with mental and physical disabilities. And it started by just doing some simple assembly. And what we found was that program with that one individual was successful. And over the last 35 years, it's grown to the point where we now have 75 people at Stonebelt who are making medical devices for us as a supplier. And I love this example because it shows that this isn't philanthropy. This isn't us just giving money to somebody. This is us using our resources and our opportunities to make impact on people's lives, but at the same time, do good business. We also heard that there are a lot of people in our community who are struggling because they didn't yet have the education they needed to be successful. In our 5-county region alone, there are 29,000 people of working age who don't yet have their high school diploma. And often this leads to a dead-end job or a job that doesn't have any upward mobility. So we recognized this and we created a program that allows people to come to work at Cook part-time in the morning and go to school in the afternoon, but we pay them full-time. When we started this program, we didn't have a lot of expectations. We didn't know how many people would apply or be interested. But over the course of the program, over the last few years, we now have the ability to service 20 people at the same time, allow them to come work and also get their education. And we've graduated more than 200 people from this program. So we have a long way to go and we need some help. But already talking to these folks, you can see the impact that's having. It's giving them the opportunity to go on, continue their education, or to advance with inside Cook. We also think it's important that we don't ask these folks to stay with Cook for a certain period of time after this education. It's our belief that if somebody comes to Cook and gets their education, we hope they're going to stay, we hope they love it here, but if they don't and they leave, our community is better because we now have a more empowered member of our community. Like many of us in Indiana, we've seen the negative impact that substance use disorder can have on our employees, their families, and our communities. So several years ago, we co-founded an organization called Stride. And the mission of that organization is to bring all the stakeholders in our area to the table and start to discuss how we align ourselves around the needs of patients and how we can best deliver our resources and our care to people who are struggling with substance use disorder. And what I find most fulfilling about this organization is that we came together as a group and we focused on the needs of people. And we said, what are the greatest challenges that those people are facing, and how can we as a group of organizations align ourselves to best solve that problem? We put politics aside, and we put individual agendas aside, and we said, how as a group can we work best together? And through that effort, we opened one of Indiana's first emergency crisis centers. It's called the Stride Center. And this is a place where first responders, whether they're police officers or firefighters, can take people who are in a mental health or substance use crisis. They can take them pre-arrest, helps keep people out of the judicial system, and it helps people stay out of the emergency room where they're not really staffed or trained to be able to provide long-term care. It will also serve as the front door to all of the resources within the Stride Coalition in our community. We obviously don't have all the answers to the challenges that face us as a society. But I am proud to work for an organization that believes it's important to be an active participant in trying to find the solutions. And so I guess that's what I would ask all of you today, is to begin to think about how we as organizations can be active members in our communities to help find solutions to these big problems. Over the next 10 years, there's no doubt that we'll be facing challenges that can't be solved by government alone, or by companies alone, or not-for-profits. It's going to take all of us working together in alignment and supporting each other to tackle these issues. So I hope that's the lesson that we take away from this pandemic, that we can come together as organizations, as companies, as governments, to tackle big problems and make big changes. And I hope that our thinking continues to evolve, so that all of us begin to think about more than just a financial return. We begin to think about how we support our communities and how those communities in turn support us. So I just want to say thank you for all that you've done over the last 6 months. Indiana has been incredibly impactful on the healthcare system, not just locally, but all across the world. So thank you for that. But also thank you for rethinking how your organization might impact its community and help us tackle big issues in the future. Thank you very much.
Truly, a tremendous amount of work is taking place by these companies, which is affecting not only Hoosiers, but people around the world.